Hi, and welcome to Lesson 7-1. Our topic today is preparing an income statement. Back in Chapter 6, you created what we're looking at now, which is a worksheet. And on the worksheet, if you look kind of on the right half of the worksheet, you have an income statement column, and then you had your balance sheet columns. Well, now in Chapter 7, we are going to create a form called an income statement, and then tomorrow we're going to be creating a form called the balance sheet. So in order to create these forms, like the income statement form, you would have to look at the worksheet in order to get that information. So today we're going to focus strictly on the numbers, the amounts that appear on the income statement columns, as well as the account titles that are related to those amounts. What you're looking at now is an example of what an income statement looks like. The heading is pretty much the same as what we saw back on the worksheet, except now we're going to call it an income statement instead of a worksheet. You have your business name, you have for month ended, whatever the month is, because this is representing the end of a fiscal period. And then you have your income statement below, which is broken into two categories. Your first category would be your revenue, and then your second category would be your expenses. As far as revenue goes, the only revenue that we have is sales, and expenses are your expenses. So if I go back one slide again real quick, you can see that we have total sales, and we have all of our expenses. So sales and expenses are the only two things that appear in the income statement columns. Okay, so I'm looking at the top here. I'm looking at my revenue. Revenue is sales. And these two columns here, if you're looking at the two columns on the right, you'll notice that they are not labeled debit and credit columns. These are not debit and credit columns. Instead, the column on the left represents individual amounts. The column on the right represents total amounts. So because there is only one sales account title, we're going to put the total sales in the total column. And then your next heading below, you have your expenses. And we have advertising all the way through utilities expense. So you list all the account titles in the same order that they appear on the worksheet, as well as all of their amounts, separate amounts that are listed in the separate amount column. On the bottom, you see total expenses. Really what you need to do is just add up all these expenses, or just look back at your worksheet, and those expenses were already totaled in the worksheet. So you really don't need to do it twice, unless you want to, just to double check your work. But you can see here that our total expenses, which were $1466, are the same total expenses that we see here on our income statement. Just to save time, I would just take the total from the worksheet. Then on the bottom, you have your net income, which all that is taking your sales and subtracting your total expenses, which is $2,099 in this example, or just look back at your worksheet. You've already calculated the net income on the worksheet, so I would take the net income that you've already calculated. But it's not a bad idea just to double check your work and do it again. On the far right, we have what are called percent of sales. These are what are referred to as component percentages. Your sales is always going to represent 100% of your revenue. If you happen to have two sales account titles, which can happen occasionally, those would each be 50% each, which together would be 100% total. So all in all, your sales is always 100% of your total revenue. And then down below, you can see the percentage for total expenses, and then there's another percentage for net income. To get these percentages, you take your total expenses, which in this case was $1466, divide that into your total sales, and that will give you the percentage. And you always want to round to the nearest 0.1%. And then you do the same for your net income. You take your total net income, divide that also into your total sales, and you get a percentage, in this case 58.9, and again, you round to the nearest 0.1%. Also, to double check that these percentages are correct, when you add the two percentages in the bottom, your percentage for total expenses and your percentage for net income, they should add up to exactly 100, which at the top of your screen, 100 was 100% of our sales. So the two percentages on the bottom, when you add them together, should equal exactly 100. And that is how you complete an income statement form. I already mentioned the heading. I just want to repoint out again that you list the name of the company on the top line, your form, which is the income statement, and then for month ended, because this is the end of the fiscal period. And again, here is the same example I've already shown you before. It just kind of labels what you would need in each category. So now what we're going to do is we're going to complete the work together for section 7-1. And I've just to kind of save time, I did put a picture of the income statement at the top of your screen, just to that way we can see it as I'm talking. So the directions for the work together say to prepare an income statement for the month ended July 31st of the current year. Calculate and record the component percentages for total expenses and your component percentages for net income. Round calculations to the nearest 0.1%. And it tells us that our company name is Darlene's Delivery Service for month ended July 31st. So the first thing we're going to do is go ahead and complete our heading. So we have Darlene's Delivery Service on the top line, which is the name of our business. We are creating an income statement, which is the name of the form. And it is for month ended July 31st, 2014 for this current year. The next thing you want to do on the left is include the heading. And the heading, our first heading is revenue. And we look up at the top at our worksheet, and the only revenue we had was sales. So we put our account title sales, and on the total column, which is the right column on the right, the total sales, as you can see above, is 5,511. I did not put that in the left column, I put it in the right column, which is my totals column, because we only have one sales. And our next heading is expenses. And you can see at the top of your screen we had advertising, we have insurance expense, we have miscellaneous expense, and then we have supplies expense. So I list the account titles on the left, slightly indented, and then each separate expense amount is listed in the separate amount column on the left. The next thing I need to do is total up all of my expenses. So my next title is total expenses, and you can see from the worksheet up above our total expenses after supplies expense was 2,181. Since that is a total, that's going to go in the total column on the right, and my final title would be my net income. And if we look at our worksheet at the top, our net income was 3,330, which is a total. So in my total column on the right, I'm going to list 3,330. The next thing that I will do is calculate my component percentages. In my example, I told you that sales always is 100%. Had we had two sales, sometimes you have sales for services, sometimes you have a sales just for retail. You may have two sales account titles, each one would be 50% each. But in this case, we only had one sales account, so that represents 100%. Now the next one we have, our next component percentage is for our total expenses. So what we're going to do is we're going to take our total expenses, which was 2,181, we're going to divide that into our total sales at the top, which was 5,511. And the percent you get, and I kind of have a calculator right there you can see, the percentage was our decimal, was 0.3957. So when I turn that into a percentage, because I always want to round to the nearest 0.1%, it is going to be 39.6, because if you look at my calculation, we did have the number 7 next to the 5, so we always want to round up when anytime you have a number over 5. So our component percentage is 39.6. I'm going to do the same thing for my net income. I'm going to take my 3,330, divide that into my total sales, which was 5,511. The decimal I get is 0.6042. So as a percentage, that ends up being 60.4%. 4. I did not have to round up because the number next to the 4 was a 2, so I did not have to round up for that. So this is how you calculate your income statement and your component percentages. Next, you will complete the 7-1 on your own, which is pretty much the same process. You will have different account titles for your expenses and different amounts, but the process is the same. Thank you, and I will see you tomorrow when we complete our balance sheet for section 7-2.